Good morning. It's Ginny and Tim. We have a fun episode here for you today.
Yes.
We are going to talk about myths that we found on the internet. And you decide if it's fact or fiction. But I'd like to hear your comments too, by the way. Have you heard any of these myths? Because some of them I'm like, I never heard of.
Yep. And I'll give my take on some of these. I've just barely glanced over this list. Some of this I'm going to actually be my live reaction and my initial thoughts on them. So I could even be wrong on some of these. So if you have more details or information, please leave in the comments.
For sure. This is going to be a fun one. We have the best myth that we're saving for last. So stay tuned for that one. So we got quite the list to go through. But before we do, go to dstech.net after you watch the video, so that you can sign up for our newsletter where I share all kinds of tips and news like the Vegas hack that just happened and productivity tips and stuff like that. Plus, you can get your free security scan. So let's dive in.
Okay.
What's the first one?
The first one on this list, if you had an older TV or an older CRT monitor, it said slapping or hitting the device fixes it. So maybe back
I
in the
remember
day,
that. My dad would just go
whack the
TV a couple times, and guess what?
It would fix it, huh?
It seemed to work to me.
Yep. And so the thing with this one is, back then it kind of would work because you have the different physical components inside the TV, and maybe it's almost like a short and a wire. They were just kind of a little corroded or a little loose, and sometimes whacking it would kind of get them back in place. Unfortunately, nowadays, if your computer's acting up or your newer TV is acting up, hitting it is not going to fix it anyway at all. So you're better off not doing that. It's more reserved for like an older
Be nice
thing.
to your electronics.
Don't hit the computers anymore. It's not going to make them reseat and start working because there's so much little components in there. It's actually just going to make it worse.
You know, this one's probably not on the list, but I remember back in the day, one of the guys I worked with put a racing stripe on my computer
to make it faster. Yep. Yeah.
I don't think it worked.
I don't think that works either.
Anyway, keep going.
This one, I don't even know if this is who's actually doing this. This could just be something the internet's telling us people are doing. I don't know. It says microwaving a wet phone will dry it out. Now, I don't know who is actually doing that, but
not actually doing that. Right?
Please don't microwave your phone ever. It will never dry it out. It's going to cause, fires and issues with that. The best thing you could do with your phone, if you did get it in a puddle that I've heard of that makes sense, is putting it in like a bag of rice, and then the rice will try to absorb some of the moisture, and then maybe power up your phone. The biggest thing is don't turn it on while it's still moisture at all.
Yeah.
You want to leave it off the entire time. Hopefully it dries out, and you might get lucky and it'll start to turn on when it's dried out.
Maybe.
Maybe, yes. This one here, it talks about how more cores is always better performance, and that is kind of true. It says, while having multiple cores in the CPU can improve your multitasking performance. Typically, it doesn't necessarily mean better performance in all scenarios. Where they're really kind of getting into here is more specific for like gaming. Most games on a computer will only use up to like 4 cores, for example. So it's better to have 4 cores that are a higher speed than say 8 or 16 cores that are a lower speed. Where more cores is beneficial though is multitasking, where you may have like email up, your browser's up, you're doing a lot of things all at once. Like in a work setting, that's where more cores will definitely be more valuable. And it's more for like rendering graphics and things like that, where having that higher core speed will be more beneficial than the actual number of cores, because most programs can't use, like if you have a 16 core Ryzen 9, not many things are utilizing 16 cores or made to be able to use all of the muscle you have. So it's only going to use like 4 cores or 8 cores. So that's just kind of where it comes in with.
Interesting.
So not always just the cores. It's always about maybe the speed and the applications. Are they able to use all the cores you have? Magnets erasing all the data. So this talks about strong magnets can potentially damage data on traditional hard drives, the old spinning platters with magnet platters and things like that. It doesn't really mean they have an effect on modern solid state drives. And the example I use is, well, you have your little SD cards in your cameras and you go through security at airports all the time and they're scanning you, and those cards still work. So the SSD cards that you have are the same as like the solid state memory in your computer now. And yes, it's not going to really damage them with high, magnets with that. Now, if you have some crazy strong magnet, I don't know, I'd be curious on a test if you had some like super, super strong magnet, if it could still maybe mess it up. I don't know. But in the traditional sense, the SSDs are more resistant to that, just for the fact that
But the old hard drives?
The old hard drives did have, you took a magnet to an old hard drive, it would kind of erase and mess it up a little bit.
Interesting.
Some people would do that, yes.
Okay, so what about, is this a myth? Credit cards?
Like credit cards?
Like if you have your credit cards next to your phone, stuff like that.
I mean, I don't think that's going to really mess them up too much. I haven't dug into that specific. I think that's where people probably stretching, like I don't, because you're talking like the little chip in your credit card,
Yeah.
like the magnets and stuff. Yeah, I don't see that kind of being an issue, but I could be wrong with that. Maybe there is some interference in the newer cards with the phones, but
Who knows,
it's
right?
probably so negligible that it's probably an extremely rare occurrence. I wouldn't think that would be too much of a thing.
Okay, keep going. What else we got?
Overcharging your phone damages the battery. So it says modern smartphones are designed to prevent overcharging. Once the battery reaches 100, it stops drawing power in the charger and should just run off the wall. And I know this is the case, for example, on a Steam Deck that I have, where once you hit 100% power, the actual power thing, it just doesn't say 100 or 99 anymore. It just switches to like a cable plugged in symbol, and then you're just running off power. So it's not even trying to use the battery at all in that case. It's only more for the really new, in the last year or two devices. So if your device is still 5, 6 years old, it may not do this, and leaving it plugged in at 100 will drain the battery because it's going to go 100%, 99%, 100%, 99%, and it's going to kind of fluctuate. So if you see your phone doing that while it's plugged in, it's not doing the true charge like this says. So it's going to it will limit your battery because each cycle and that little bit of a charge fluttering at the top is a cycle, and it can lower the charge. But most of the new laptops have had this for a while, where they plug in, it won't use your laptop battery at all, run just off the wall and circumvent the battery entirely. And now the smartphone devices are catching up with that technology. So if you have a new modern smartphone in the last year or two, you're probably fine. But just if you can look at the battery, you can see is it fluctuating like 99%, 100% when it's plugged in. That's an old version, and that's still going to be damaging your phone a little bit.
If it stays at 100%?
Stays at 100% the whole time and it's just plugged in, you're good to go then, because then it's not dipping down and trying to recharge and use that phone. More RAM automatically equals faster computers. This was kind of more of a 1990s, early 2000s thing, where the RAM was the biggest thing you could put in your computer to make it go faster, because typically you had plenty of hard drive space, you typically had enough power, everything else, but it was your RAM that was always lacking. Nowadays, actually, the biggest thing that, in my opinion, you can do on your computers is install faster hard drives. Most computers will have 16 or 32 gigs of RAM, or even 8 gigs of RAM. Windows 10 is still fine for the most part, and it's not the RAM that's getting filled up, it's that your overall speed of accessing your data is kind of holding you back. So having a faster hard drive, in my opinion, nowadays is a better speed improvement than getting the more RAM on your computer. I mean, it all depends what you're doing. If you're doing a lot of photo editing, CAD drawings, things with a lot of like heavy lifting, having more RAM will still be beneficial to you. But for most people who are using office applications, emailing, web browsing, standard business stuff, having 32 gigs, 64 gigs of RAM isn't going to do anything for you, versus having an M.2 drive or a solid state drive that's extremely fast will benefit you more.
Gotcha.
Rinsing a spilled laptop with water fixes it. No, do not rinse your laptop with water. It says, well, it's essential to turn off and unplug your laptop if you spill liquid on it. Rinsing it with water is not a good idea. Water can cause further damage. Exactly. Don't just rinse your laptops. If you spill something on it, obviously take it off. Try to wipe it off the best you can, but don't like rinse it with water. My thought would be use something with like very lightly damp, because you don't want to add any more moisture to it, to try to wipe off maybe some of the stickiness from the whatever residues on it or whatever like that. You can feel free to like soda or alcohol would work. Alcohol wipes would be good. Because but then you want to watch it. You don't want to do your laptop screen with alcohol wipes. Because it could definitely damage your screen. Okay, so you got to be kind of careful with the cleaning products. That's why I always still recommend just try to use water and try to get what you can off with water, because you want to avoid cleaning products unless you get a specific cleaning product that is for laptop screens or for screens. Then it would be okay, but most cleaning products are not, and they will actually damage them. So just keep that in mind.
I think my husband's an electrician, and in general, electronics don't like moisture.
Yeah.
General rule of thumb. Any electronics.
Yeah.
Don't like moisture.
Yeah. Magnetic fields damages credit cards and hard drives, so that's what you're talking about. Well, strong magnets can disrupt the magnetic strips on credit cards.
It was on the
Everyday
list.
household magnets are not powerful enough to damage modern hard drives or SSDs. That's what I'm saying. Even SSDs could be damaged if you had like
a really strong
high powered magnet that you're purposely using to damage things. At that point, but the amount of magnetism in your phone and your speakers, even remember if you have the big old speakers, they got magnets in them. You're not gonna, you'll be fine.
Cool.
There's another one, leaving battery devices plugged in kills at 100% kills the battery life. So this again talks about smart charging, all that kind of stuff. So if you're leaving it plugged in, once it hits 100%, it should be it'll be smart enough to know it's not charging. But again, with the older devices, what would happen was if you plug your phone into the wall, it's at 100%. Maybe 5 minutes later, it goes down to 99. It would charge itself back to 100, and it would kind of do those top end cycles. The newer phones, well, you won't worry about that. It'll just be running off the wall entirely when that happens. Blowing into cartridges makes old game consoles work better. Now, I personally have experience with this, and it did work for me. Now, I don't know the specifics. I think it was like there was dust on the cartridges, which was preventing them from working. Sometimes you could hit your Nintendo, like hitting the TV, and it would work too. That sometimes can happen. But what I did as a kid, because I didn't want to blow spit into the cartridge, to me that seemed moisture on these things seemed bad. I would take the cartridge and put it under my T-shirt, and then I blow through my T-shirt into the cartridge, so that way it would kind of blow out the dust without a little bit. That's what I did anyway. I don't know if it helped at all, but that's kind of what I did with my games.
Back in the day, I remember when I used to have to troubleshoot sometimes, the RAM companies would have me use an eraser, pencil eraser on the contacts.
Yep, and that held true with my digital camera. Sometimes on the actual lens itself, when you twist onto there's a couple of gold contacts there, and sometimes if your digital camera lens isn't functioning properly, it's because you're in like a dirty environment and you're switching lens. Sometimes dust gets in there, and it's the same thing. You would take like a Q-tip with like just a tiny little bit of alcohol in it, and then you would wipe the gold tips, and it would wipe off any corrosion or anything on that gold tip, and then when it would remake its connection good again.
Makes sense.
So yeah.
Interesting.
So it's in here talks about how closing apps extends battery life. Now, many people believe that force closing apps on their phones will save battery life. However, it says modern operating systems are designed to manage apps efficiently, and force closing them will sometimes consume more battery power than leaving them open. I don't know. I'm calling bluff on that one. This seems like it's just like information from people who want to leave apps running on your stuff all the time. I'm still of the believer that I limit my cell phone where I'll go through maybe the act of initially force closing it. That initial thing will use more power than, say, if it runs for 24 hours. But in general, go through your smartphone, go through your computer, and every background app or every app that you're not actively using, disable it. Because in the long run, in my opinion, it still will give you more battery life. And it's not so much the battery life, but they're not collecting all that data from you all the time. Why do you want all these apps running, collecting all the data of every one of your interactions? It should only be doing that when you're actively using it. So that's I still like to go through there.
I'm guilty.
Why just leaving them all run all the time?
I do. Well, look.
Yeah, well, that's most users too, and that's fine. That's no big deal.
I don't even close them. I just close my laptop.
I think they're talking more about like the background, like running in the background, waiting to go. Like in Windows, there's the background apps where it has like Cortana and all these different things running.
Like
you can
those
disable
things.
that on your computer, and then on your smartphone, same thing. If I don't want my Gmail running in the background idling until I actually need my Gmail application, right? So that's kind of where I look at that. Just old school thinking. So you get maybe the newer devices, it doesn't matter as much because they got so much stuff, but I still like to close out all of those myself.
This is me closing it.
Yeah.
Just flip the lid.
Private browsing is completely anonymous. So most people might be familiar with like in Chrome or Edge, there's like an incognito or a private browsing window, things like that. And it talks about how they may help protect your privacy to some extent, but they do not make you completely anonymous online. Obviously, your ISP will see any website you're going and things like that. So just by going into private browsing, don't just run off starting doing illegal activity, you're going to get caught. I mean, obviously, it's what private browsing is intended for is for locally on that machine to have a session that's decoupled from your normal sign-ins. So, for example, if I'm logging into my work computer,
sense. I do that for some of our apps.
I'm logged in as tim@dstech.net, and I open anything in my browser, they're all synced to be tim@dstech.net. But now when I need to log in on behalf of a customer or to do some troubleshooting, I can't just open a new tab and log in as them because there's two accounts now signed in. So I'll do incognito window, which means it's not going to use any of your existing sign-ins. It won't keep a local history, so your browsing is private on that computer for that session. It's not remembering the history or anything with your cookies and things like that. But all your traffic nowadays, I mean, if you don't realize all of your traffic you have is logged everywhere somewhere. I mean, that's just the way of the world. So it's nothing's going to be completely anonymous unless you're using like Tor through VPN and like a Tails OS and some crazy stuff. And 99.9% of people aren't doing that. So
yeah.
Macs don't get viruses. That was kind of an old, I don't know if it came from like wasn't there like the 90s commercials where like the Mac and the PC person and they had people going back and forth?
I always thought it was true.
But no,
is it a myth?
It's a myth because even just Just this week, Apple on their iOS phones released there was a 0-day
That's
update
right.
that happened where if you
I
could get a
remember.
text message on your phone, you don't even need to open the message itself, and it would start running and doing things. So there was an extreme vulnerability Apple had, and they released a patch real quickly to update all your smartphones immediately because of this. So anything can be hacked if people put enough time into it, whether it be your Mac, your Windows, or even there's Linux viruses out there too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So keep your stuff updated.
Yep. You need to fully discharge your battery before charging. So this one is kind of true.
I remember
This for the
that.
older, like the nickel batteries, I believe they were. Or to say here, yeah, the nickel-based batteries, because they would have kind of like a memory in them. So the initial charge you want it to go as low as you can, then the first charge do a full charge to kind of set the memory, and then from there you're kind of okay. The newer lithium batteries don't really operate like that. They just operate a number of cycles. So it's 10,000 charges, whether it's from 80% to 100 or from 0 to 100. So if you wanted to get more cycles and life of your batteries, it still is important to kind of like minimize the amount of charging you're doing. An example, anecdotal, that I use is my cell phone. I only plug it in when it's dead and then I charge it. Where my significant other, she's on her phone all the time, browsing internet, browsing Facebook, whatever it is. So she's always strapped to the wall with the phone plugged in. We bought our phones at the same time. My battery will still last 2.5 hours or so on a charge, where hers is down to like an hour. But that's just because the amount of cycles and the amount of charging she's gone through has been more than I have on mine. That's not necessarily because I wait to go, but I think it still plays a small role, but it's the number of times it's charging, the number of cycles. So it really doesn't matter the memory as much, but it does remember
I miss the
amount.
days where we could replace the battery.
Yes, I would like that if we could buy new batteries for our phones. They do make little like the USB battery banks and things like that. They're trying to make them like almost built into your phone case now, where you could like have it plugged in. I don't know
I
if
did
you've seen
see
some of
those.
So there are ways to kind of augment it, but yeah, it is kind of a shame. I do miss that, but maybe
Anyway.
who knows? Maybe someone will come out with a new phone that allows you to do that, and then it'll be the rave, More bars equal better signal. This can just be because if you're like in a noisy area, say you have 5 bars, but you're surrounded by all these buildings and all these other interference, that the amount of speed bandwidth you're going to get through that 5 bars could be less than maybe 3 bars in the country where you don't have a bunch of interference going on with it. So typically more bars is a better signal in a sense, but it is kind of a myth where if you're in a high signal area, I mean, it's happened here when the fair comes into town. There's one cell phone tower over there for the fairgrounds, and so all of our cell phones are onto one cell phone tower. It says I have 5 or 6 bars, but because everyone's attached to that, my speed is so slow I can't even watch a YouTube video. Even though it says 5 bars, it doesn't mean that everyone's saturating that tower.
That makes sense now. I don't know how many times we'll be traveling and one of us will say, "What the heck? I have 5 bars. How come I can't open this?" That. Now that
it's
makes
because
sense.
they're in a high density area. It's just like your internet connection, only so much can go through it. And so, I just noticed that here because we live close to the fairgrounds. So normally my cell phone's fine 99% of the year, but during the fair, my cell phone is so slow and so sluggish. I always have to use Wi-Fi when I can because it's it's so slow. Because anyway, that's
interesting. I just didn't correlate the two.
Yep. You can't get a virus from opening an email. I don't know what. Maybe this is old from the 90s, but yeah, even just opening an email now, if it's malicious, sometimes can allow you to attack.
It could be old because I used ChatGPT to make this list.
Yeah, and exactly.
It could be old.
Yeah. Simply opening an email is unlikely to infect your computer with malware. Clicking on the links is clearly we always say don't click the link. That's clearly the most important thing. But there are some very rare emails out there where even just the act of opening them, if you don't have security in place, like if you have anything with us, you're fine because we block images and scripts and a lot of that stuff. We'll have email filters before they get to your inbox where it scans them. But if you didn't have all that stuff in place, you're just at your home computer opening up like Gmail emails, right? Or something that's not being scanned actively. There are some malicious ones where you just simply open the email, and in the email it loads an image, and then loads the image will start doing crazy things.
That's kind of scary.
Mm-hmm.
I did open.
It's very rare, but it is possible to have those.
Remember, I opened one a week ago. Was it a week ago?
Oh yeah.
I opened one.
Yeah, you just wanted to make sure.
Because I opened it, and then there's like, I don't know, something happened on the screen.
It popped up like installing or uninstalling without even clicking anything, right? You just
all I did was open the email because the sender was legit. I was like, I know who this person is. it opened up the email.
But that sender was compromised. And then
Exactly,
it
I
ended
didn't
up
know
going
that.
through. And then we took the, unplugged the computer, all the standard steps to go and scan and all that stuff. But yeah, just the act of opening emails can
Can do
cause things to run now. It's just the way things are.
So you gotta watch,
Mhm.
really watch.
This
Okay.
one repeats the incognito mode, hides your identity completely. Again, that's not true. You're gonna have to use like some sort of Tor with a VPN and some hidden OS. Like everything's tracked now. Don't think you can get away with stuff.
Don't even try all that stuff because
Yeah, no.
I mean you're just exposing yourself to even more dark
more,
web
exactly.
stuff, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And if you're going into those things, there's so many hackers, so many things.
absolutely.
It's not. Yeah,
not worth it.
not worth it at all. More megapixels equals a better camera. And that used to kind of be the thing back in the day where, they'd always sell the megapixels was more dots, but realistically it matters more. At least I know this from photography, your lens quality matters. I mean, you could have a 20 megapixel camera, but if you have a plastic lens, it's not going to perform as good as a 6 megapixel camera with like a Carl Zeiss glass good quality lens with, and then also the sensor that's inside the camera and how much light it's taking in, whether it's going to be more important than the actual megapixel. Megapixel just means how big the image is and how many dots are taking.
Does that count on phones too?
Yeah, phones as
Phones,
well.
same thing.
Yeah,
Just
they
a
always-
little device inside.
Yep, depending on the sensor inside can make way more of an impact than the amount of megapixels you have. So
Interesting. I did not know that one.
So yeah, same thing. This with other factors like sensor size, lens quality, image processing play a significant role in the overall image quality. I mean, nowadays the smartphones are so good. I mean, you've done it where you take out your phone and you remember maybe 10 years ago, if you're in the living room at night with like a yellow light on, you could hardly get a picture of anything because it's all blurry and it's low light. Well, now you do that with your modern smartphone and the picture looks just like the lights are on because it's smart enough with technology to kind of fill in the gaps and kind of
It's
help
very cool.
with that.
Very
So
cool.
it's definitely awesome. It allows more people to take photos, but still some of the classic traditional photography, the sensor, the quality of the lens, all that plays into more effect than just the megapixel. So yeah. Password strength is all about length. Well, password length is important. Strong passwords should include a mix of upper lowercase characters, things like that as well. And that's kind of a mixed bag too, because honestly, passphrases are, in my opinion, more secure, and those usually don't have symbols in them. Like you could have an entire sentence. I always say like, the cow jumps over the moon as my generic one that I say, but like that entire sentence as itself with spaces included is going to be more secure than like a 12 character that you can hardly remember because it's so unique. You still want to put in some sort of weird symbols and things like that, because how hackers work is when they're trying to brute force, which means they're trying multiple passwords over and over and over again to try to check yours at a rate of like 1,000 attempts per second kind of a thing. They'll use what they call libraries or dictionaries, where they feed in the program, use all known English words, now use all Chinese words, now use all Russian words, and they'll feed dictionaries in to try to break your passwords. So if you don't have any symbols at all, it can be broken quicker because typically they're just going to use the standard English dictionary first, but by including the symbols, it can make it more secure, but still the length is still the biggest thing that will impact the security of it. That is still true. Like if you have like a long 32, 40 character password because it's a sentence with spaces in it, that's going to be way harder to break than a 12 character password with all kinds of symbols and craziness in it.
So that one's not a myth.
That's, I guess, password strength is only about length. I mean, it's kind of like I don't know. It's a weird one because it is all about length now. It's on the fence. Symbols do matter, but not as much as length. Length does matter. That is kind of symbols can matter a little bit, but it's not, and that's becoming more mute now as we go. It's all about it is about the length, in my opinion, just from what I've seen. Hovering over links before clicking checks the legitimacy. So you can hover over the email to check it, but sometimes it might. So they can even spoof that though. Like when you hover over your link, you'll in the bottom of your browser, it'll tell you like the address it's going to be going to. And sometimes you can look at that and decide is it true or not. But a lot of those things can look malicious, but they're just a tracking website and it's normal. Or you can't really just rely on just that.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Like when your email, like you'll have click here to do whatever. Before you actually click it and you just hover your mouse over it, it'll kind of tell you the address it's going to be going to below, and you can kind of look to see if it's malicious or not that way possibly. But I wouldn't. If you think an email is malicious, I wouldn't even hover over links and do that kind of things. Just report it to your security team and let them do the actual investigation on it too. Because sometimes just the links itself, like they can hide that fact as well and make it. I'd rather.
I've done that before. I've forwarded emails to Josh and Eric, be like,
Mhm.
is this legit? Because I don't want to click anything. And then one of them will say, oh, yeah, I talked to that person and
Mhm.
told them to email you. And I'll be like, oh, okay.
Exactly. So
So,
when in questioning, I'd rather not have the end users just be doing all these checks. I'd rather leave it up to your security team or your IT team or someone that's familiar with it. Just because then it eliminates error where someone's hovering over
That's
the
a
link
good-
and they accidentally clicked it because they didn't. I don't know. Just I like to avoid
or
that.
they opened it. They opened the email, right?
Yes,
So,
exactly. Yeah, they're already into it. So.
so I guess forwarding it doesn't do it either. Take a screenshot.
Yep, and that kind of goes into the last thing here. Closing a malware pop-up before it fully loads is safe. So like you were saying in your email, it popped up real quick, or you close it, or you click
I
the
closed
link.
it.
You click the link and it pops up, and you're like, oh no, I exited out before anything can happen. You need to notify everyone immediately that you did that, and just own it because it's going to be a lot quicker to rectify that and reset your password, sign you out, and get your relog back in than it is if you waited a day. We found out about the next day. Now they've been in your account for an entire day, and now we got to try to.
I understood
dive.
the assignment. I
So,
did.
Yes.
I let you know right away. I was like,
Yes.
Tim, I opened this email.
Yep. So. Yeah, so those are just, I guess you could say, some common myths or different
or
things.
half myths.
Or half myths, and my general
So,
opinion.
what
on
are
it.
some interesting myths you've heard? I'd like to hear them. Drop them in the comments.
Mhm.
And if you have any questions, feel free to drop that too, because Tim obviously knows a lot of stuff. He blew through this list like nothing.
Well, and again, I could be wrong on some of this stuff. It's always changing. That's the thing with technology and security and all this stuff, is it's changing every day.
All
So
the
what's
time.
correct today isn't going to be correct in two
Yeah.
more years, and what was correct 2 years ago isn't correct today, and it's always
It
just
moves
changing.
fast.
So.
And it moves fast.
um,
Because they're smart people.
mhm.
They figure things out too. So
Yep. And so the biggest
Just-
myth. Do you remember what it was?
the biggest myth of all is, do you know, right?
Yep.
That your business is secure.
Yep.
Do you know this?
If you do, great. But otherwise, you should really leverage a company like DS Tech, or if you're not already working with a company that will do security scans, check for vulnerabilities, keep you updated all the time. Because even if you're secure today at this point in time, next week you might not be secure anymore, because there is no set it and forget it with security.
No.
It's a journey, and it's always changing.
Always changing.
So.
And you're only as secure as what? Your
Your
latest
weakest
hire.
link, yeah.
Your
You're only as
latest
secure
hire?
as the intern you just hired to
Yeah.
help out with things, because maybe they're not trained in everything yet, but that's still the weakest link to your organization. So it's important that everyone, from the interns to the presidents, are all on the same page with the security policy, and they're following the proper steps.
Absolutely.
So.
Stay on top of it. Stay safe out there. Sign up for our newsletter, dstech.net, and get your free security scan in the same place.
Yep.
See you next time.